And this is exactly what was the idea, as Milton tells us, of the new world that was created for Adam and Eve after they left or lost their paradisical home. They lost the complete purity of life. They lost the complete acceptance of the divine will. They were children. And then all of a sudden they weren't children anymore. And they suddenly faced themselves. And they made themselves girdles of fig leaves to conceal or cover themselves. And these represent to a certain degree the vast body of cultures, traditions, social mores, and everything you can think of. Everything that you can think of in a form to cover the emptiness of the inner self, to disguise the poverty of the self by concealing it beneath the luxury-stricken outer personality. In other words, we began to cultivate the habit of the famous house paint slogan, save the surface and you save all. So we've been trying to save the surface ever since. And we're spending billions of dollars every year dressing up the surface. We're doing everything you can think of to look our best. In most cases, do our worst at the same time. So we are finding that the effort to conceal our own weaknesses doesn't work very well. Instead of producing a kind of a bluffed culture that would fool ourselves and maybe a few other people, we find the whole thing falling apart. And the only answer to this collapse is the realization that the solution lies within ourselves. For into the human being's compound is not only added the physical sources of energy and so forth, but within that same compound is the inevitable and eternal presence of deity. Within mankind there is life simply because there is a divine power in man. The divine power is still there, always has been and always will be. When that power departs, death follows. So we have within ourselves at all times the potential of self-correction. It is possible for us to change our ways because within our nature is a higher way which we'll have a long time before we can catch up with entirely. But there is within us the potential of infinite good. This potential has to be cultivated. Milton found out in his day that this was the weakness in the educational system. Education was not looking for that union with the divine, which is the secret of human security. Education was not teaching the individual to be true to the divine birthright, which was his natural heritage. Education dealt with secondary matters and tertiary matters. It dealt with making a living or gaining a reputation or having office in public or something of this nature, or perhaps, worst of all, settling down for life on the campus. It was not solutional to things. It did not teach the individual the mystery of his own destiny. Yet that mystery was unfolded to Adam and Eve by Raphael while they were still in the garden. In other words, the intuitive faculty was still there. Man knows, if he goes deeply enough into himself, the answer to his own problem. But he doesn't want to explore that area too thoroughly, because if he finds out what he should do, he may not be able to do what he should not do with a good spirit. He might feel reformed arising within him, which would be most discomforting. The individual still wants to do exactly as he pleases. And this willfulness, according to the Zohar, for this fell the angels. Self-will, as opposed to divine will, is the mystery of good and evil. Self-will represents a small fragment within each of us that never yet has won any major problem or defeated any major evil. Self-will is the willingness to depend entirely upon the gratification of personal desires. The mystics of all nations, the Hindus, the Chinese, and even the Greeks and Latins, realized that self-will was a tremendous force. That self-will can and does in most instances completely control the individual. And furthermore, the collective self-will controls the world. Therefore, the only problem that we have to really consider is how to re-educate the self-will. How to bring the self-will into harmony with the divine will, so that we can say honestly, not our will, but thine be done. This development of the inner will to achieve the release from evil is part of the theology of many of the early church fathers, and perhaps especially it was present in the writings of Ambrose and several of the well-known saints. But this self-will with us is merely the strength of gratification. Self-will sustains us while we make a mistake. We does it because we are basing our entire way of life upon externals. The individual is much more concerned with his adjustment to the outer world than he is with his adjustment to the inner life. And yet without adjustment to the inner life, not only his own outer world, but everyone else's will fall apart. The individual cannot survive if he compromises with principles. He thinks he can, but not only in this life, but in the great pattern of things. Integrity is the only asset that is permanently acceptable in nature. So, not having listened to the voice of Raphael in the garden, Adam and Eve started out into a world in which they propagated and propitiated the powers of self-interest. They suddenly knew themselves as beings, but they did not know the power that was locked within them. They realized they were punished. We are all punished. But they hated to accept the fact that they were the responsible source of their own trouble. So all the way down through to the time of Noah, the problem of the multiplying and replenishing the earth was hampered and destroyed by the absolute abandon to gratification or to the fulfillment of personal desires. And this pre-Noah world represents, in a sense, perhaps young people graduating from school, now on their own, and desirous and determining to do as they please. And in most instances, there is a great disillusionment ahead. The individual has now power, but not principle. He can do these things, but he doesn't know why he shouldn't. He can take a beautiful and perfect situation and mutilate it without accepting responsibility. He can lie, but if this lie accomplishes something for his personal benefit at the moment, he feels personally justified. And this situation has also now more or less gotten down into the religious life of the person. Religion that was once a bulwark of integrities is now badly compromised. And today, religion has also felt the depression of lack of integrities. So finally Noah came along, the only one just in his generation, and the world was inundated by a flood. Now in the Bible, if you go back to the original Hebrew, the word deluge does not mean water. The deluge means an oblivion, a tremendous descent of futility upon the earth. It was more, we might say, the complete loss of the integrities, the virtues, the principles. It was chaos rather than water. And over this devilish situation, Noah and his family were preserved. This situation also can be made contemporary at any time.